symbolism of Mars is courage, conquering new things, controlled aggression, the ability to get up and do stuff and be action orientated. But it hasn't been able to do that. It's been in a slightly passive aggressive kind of mode. And then on the 7th, it will go into Taurus, which is in its detriment. It does not work well in Taurus. And Taurus is going to come very, very close. It's going to make a conjunction to Uranus. And Mars and Uranus are very unpredictable planets. And then it's going to square also Saturn. Mars and Saturn squaring each other, in traditional astrology, they're known as the two malefic planets. I tell you, this period between the 8th of January and 21st, 22nd is heavy. And it's not this kind of blind optimism, don't worry. We'll all go back to normal in spring as here in the UK we're getting this kind of, it'll be fine by Easter. We'll all go back to normal. No. And February is a kind of a key moment where you will begin to see come up to the surface some quite extraordinary new ideas.
Welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore magic, esoterica and the world of the spirits, and everything in between. For episode 48, we are joined by astrologer Demian Allan to discuss the forecast for 2021. Now, this was recorded on the 3rd of January, and it's interesting recording this intro on the 9th of January to see what's recently happened in the United States and really how scarily accurate Demian is off the bat. So, in the show, we discuss when things are going to get better. We discuss revolution, our relationship with food, and the parts of the year that they're going to be a lot more challenging, and how our lives are going to change, how things are going to get simplified, hopefully in a good way. We'll also go over when travel will open up again, and in the plus section we get into the challenges across autumn and winter, a bit more about travel. Now, before we kick off, a quick thank you to Ankh patrons Desiria and Etain Lost. As always, I'm hugely grateful for your support. Oh, and before I forget, Demian has just started a YouTube channel, so do go and check that out, and the links are in the show notes. If you want to hear the Plus show, then sign up to the Patreon and you get the Plus show along with a host of other benefits. To that end, if you like Spirit Box and want to support it, there are a number of ways you can do so. There's Patreon, where you get the Plus show, as just mentioned, and extra content. Or you can just hit the PayPal link that is in every YouTube video and my link tree. I'm always interested in people's experiences with the other, from hauntings to shadow people. So if you have a story to tell, reach out to me either on Patreon, Twitter, or on Insta. Okay, let's get into it. Let's see what 2021 has for us. Mr. Allan, it is a pleasure to have you back on the Spirit Box. You were with us, was it back in October? I think it was October.
Well, first of all, Happy New Year to you.
Well, thank you, and likewise, Happy New Year to you.
And thanks for inviting me back.
Well, after your successful prediction of Biden winning the American presidency, I think it would be remiss of me not to. So yeah, as we were just discussing before we hit record, the show was really well received, and yeah, so I've let the patrons know and the audience know that you were coming back and going to give us your rundown of what astrology of 2021 is looking like.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do for this one is kind of do it on a month-to-month basis. Cool. I think when looking ahead, to year, things can change very, very quickly. Some planets move really fast, some move pretty slow, and some make aspects between two planets or three planets that really set things off. So I'm going to go through it at a month-to-month basis. So we'll start in January and we'll end up in December. And obviously doing doing this in 2021 after the year that we've just experienced. When I last did the last podcast, I was certainly reflecting at some work that I'd done in 2011, written about that time, that crisis point. So it's about looking forward, but obviously we're still in how we've responded to, particularly the last 2 years. And it's kind of like, that whole to use an analogy is if there's a leak in your roof, and someone tells you there's a leak in the roof, and you go, yeah, but you know what, I'm just going to do a bit of a bodge job on it, and everything will be fine. And I'll just put a couple of plasters on this and it'll be fine. That roof is still going to leak, and if you didn't respond to it in the right way, it's still going to leak. And I kind of use that analogy in response, particularly to governmental institutions at the moment, is particularly in the UK. I'm commenting more on the UK because I'm based in the UK. But there is this kind of very, at times, slow response. Whether you believe it or not, there is this sort of stuttering that is currently going on. And the reason I bring that in, because it really sets the tone for January. Out of all, so we're recording this in early January. I can say that, can't we? It's the 3rd of January we're recording this.
Yeah.
And, out of all the months of the year for 2021, January is probably the toughest. It really is. Astrologically speaking, it is the toughest. And, the reason why, oh my God, there's so many reasons. So where do I start? So here I go. Okay. So as we're looking at the moment, it's the 3rd of January, and we've got a lot of planets in Capricorn, and Capricorn's been the sign of the zodiac that's dominated, I would say, over the last 2 years. It's the sign that's accentuated and brought about the political instability, and in a way the pandemic, by a cluster of planets and eclipses happening in Capricorn and its opposite sign of Cancer. And these are fundamentally, I talked about in the last podcast, of Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto. Those are the three main players in the difficulties that we experienced in last year. I can say that now, last year, yay. Now, one of the things is that January we're moving into new territory, and this was really the first aspect of this was on December the 21st, the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, which was the conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. And I don't know if you had a chance to see this in the sky at sunset, these two planetary bodies, but you can see with the naked eye. It was a really beautiful experience. This conjunction and those two planets going into Aquarius, that is a major new cycle, beginning of the element of air signs starting to dominate instead of earth signs that have been dominating for a couple of 100 years now. But the problem with that is that they've gone into Aquarius, those two planets, and they've immediately squaring Uranus in Taurus. Now, Uranus in Taurus has been there briefly in 2018, but then in spring of 2019 went into Taurus, and Uranus takes 84 years to go around the whole of zodiac. It spends 7 years in each sign of the zodiac. So at the moment, it's at 6 degrees in Taurus. The last time that that Uranus was in Taurus was between 1935 and 1942. And, immediately the rise of Mussolini, Hitler, Japanese military, the Great Depression, unemployment, problems with productivity in general, pretty tough years. And some of those themes are definitely rising. I think the unemployment factor is a big thing that we haven't even experienced to its full extent as yet. Because Uranus in Taurus is about how we value. What do we value in the world? Or what do we value in our country? It also talks about, the symbolism is a lot about agriculture and how we look after the land, and how do we deal with food? Where does the food come from? And also it deals with finances, the banks, properties, possessions. And Uranus is a rule breaker. It's the next planet along from Saturn, and Uranus breaks the rules that Saturn have implemented. And so you have a set of rules that Saturn implements, a set of structures on society, and Uranus is there to break those, to unearth new structures that have a much more liberating aspect to them. Now, what's happened is that Saturn is gone into Aquarius, and it's made a 90-degree angle to Uranus. And this is going to fundamentally build up to the middle of January. So these are, first of all, I'm going to say some key dates here. January the 8th, which were not that long, till the 21st of January, that 12, 13 days is absolute key here. It is, to me, the astrological energy is so tricky during that period, because you've got Jupiter squaring Uranus, you've got Saturn squaring Uranus, and you've got, just to add a little bit of spice in there, you've also got on the 7th of January, Mars goes into Taurus. Now, Mars has been in Aries since July of 2020. It spent 6 months. It usually spends about 2 months in a sign. It takes 2 years to go around the zodiac, apart from when it goes retrograde. Retrograde basically means, for those who don't know, from planet Earth, you're looking up, it appears that the planet is going backwards. It's actually an optical illusion, but it appears. So us astrologers say it's going retrograde. The energy is going backwards. And all planets, apart from the sun and the moon, of course, because they're not planets. One is a satellite, one is a star, but we call them planets in astrology. But all the planets do go retrograde at some point. So the classic one that we hear a lot about in astrology is Mercury Retrograde, where it's seemingly that communication goes haywire, or the trains don't run, or your laptop suddenly kapoots, and that kind of thing. But so Mars has been going retrograde in Aries. Now it rules Aries, and it went retrograde in the autumn of 2020. And then when it came out of retrogression, it started to square Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter. So Mars hasn't been able to fully work. It usually would be very comfortable because it's in its rulership in Aries, but it hasn't been able to fully manifest. And it's about being, the symbolism of Mars is courage, conquering new things, controlled aggression, the ability to get up and do stuff and be action orientated. But it hasn't been able to do that. It's been in a slightly passive aggressive kind of mode. And then on the 7th, it will go into Taurus, which is in its detriment. It does not work well in Taurus. And Taurus is going to come very, very close. It's going to make a conjunction to Uranus. And Mars and Uranus are very unpredictable planets. And then it's going to square also Saturn. Mars and Saturn squaring each other, in traditional astrology, they're known as the two malefic planets. I tell you, this period between the 8th of January and 21st, 22nd is heavy. This is a real kind of bang, we're here, we're in 2021. Now, if I was to make a prediction on that and to speculate on that, I would say that, the establishments are holding on to their way of doing things, while the general public are crying out for extreme change. And it's going to be a battle of wills that's going to come up here. But what's going to also appear is that you'll start to see how public sway or public collectiveness is going to start to change the setup of how we view our response to society and its changes here. It's already actually happening. It's already occurring, because those planets that I've mentioned, the Saturn and Jupiter, the Uranus particularly, they're in square aspect as we speak. They're just quite wide at the moment. It's going to just intensify as we go through to January here. Another key date here is the 13th of January. We have a new moon in Capricorn as well. That, to me, we get new moons every month, from new moon to the full moon, but this one is going to closely align with Pluto, which is to do with the collective virus. So I think the 13th is a bit of a key aspect, in a lot to do with vaccines, or a key date here to do with vaccines. But I think as we go on to like the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, it's going to be very stressful. January. It's not easy. It's a very despondent energy. Okay. And I'm not, I know people want to hear the good news and everything else. I get that. But, this is, and I'm sure most people intuitively will be kind of getting, yeah, I feel it. And, talking to people, that's the general feeling. God, this is just, when's this going to end? When's this going to get better? But there's a battle going on.
Right.
And it's a battle in the sky, and it's a battle of how we respond to it. So yeah, January's absolutely, that middle of January is hard. When we get to the end, particularly the 28th, we've got a full moon on the 28th of January, where the moon's in Leo and it opposes the sun in Aquarius. That's going to be interesting, because then we've got a load of planets that have gone into Aquarius. So we're going to have Mercury, we've got Saturn, we've got Jupiter, we've got the sun. We've got these planets are still in planets in Aquarius, and the 21st of December, with the winter solstice and the conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn, there was always a lot of astrologers going about a bunch of optimism and stuff like that. Well, yeah, but I think we'll start to see it as we go into February. February's is going to be setting the tone for 2021, rather than January, which will feel like a really, really bad hangover, from 2020. Like, this is never going to end kind of situation. Whereas February kind of feels like, things are happening. And again, whether you believe it or not, with the vaccines, whether you're, the vaccine thing, that is going to become much more prominent. The rise in technology. It wouldn't surprise me if February is another vaccine becomes available, or something else happens that goes, this could be even cheaper, because Aquarius is all about equality. It's got quite socialist principles, actually, Aquarius, in a lot of ways. But yeah, so it's all about equality and spreading things equally. And so I feel like that will be key decisions we made as we go into February, regarding, how we deal with the vaccine, and what we do with the vaccine, and where it goes, is absolutely going to be key here. So I think that January is going to be really, really tough.
And yeah. you mentioned food as well.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that really just from kind of news watching and kind of building a picture with last year, lockdown affecting harvest, affecting actual the farm production and food production.
Yeah.
And then with the blockages at Dover just before Christmas. One of the things that I've been kind of thinking about is how is this going to affect our actual, UK food production and food access, given that we're also hitting kind of, as you said, kind of there's unemployment looming, there's financial problems looming, and then kind of with scarcity, food prices go up. But But not just that, it's the kind of it's the logistics framework. And we've seen them get a massive kick just before and over Christmas. Whether that carries on into the year is something I'd be interested in getting your thoughts on.
Yeah, I've always, for the last few years, talked about Uranus in Taurus being the revolution of agriculture and where we get our food from. And again, a crisis has happened. The crisis has been a pandemic. And, it forces us to make changes. So we've lived in a culture recently where we've been able to eat food from all different parts of the world, out of season, straight away in our supermarkets in the Western world, and we've been able to indulge in that. Fundamentally, I think that's going to change. Because people are going to be much more want to know where the food comes from, and obviously food that is from other parts of the world that's out of season is going to be more expensive. And because of the lockdown, there's going to be problems in producing food, for the next harvest time. So we've got a situation where, let's look at the positive first. The positive is that the green industry and the agriculture industry can create jobs out of this if given the support. There is if you want to get the good stuff out, that's it. Uranus is begging, saying there needs to be a revolution in terms of agriculture, in terms of how we use the land and how we use our food. I mean, to me, and I'm being a bit speculative and I don't know this and stuff like that, but the general consensus is that, the pandemic came from food. In whatever form you want to say that in a type of food, but that's what it came from. So, again, the emphasis about food in general and where it comes from and how clean is it, and also the other thing about eating in season as well. If we look at Uranus and Taurus and we look back in history and we say that period, the late 30s and early 40s and the Great Depression and the unemployment and all of that political instability, simplicity had to come from that. And simplicity is going to have to come again, because Taurus as a sign of the zodiac is quite a simple sign of zodiac, and that's not being, detrimental to Taurians or anything. If you're listening, I'm a Taurus myself, so I can say that.
Me too.
The simple creatures, if the symbol of a bull in a field eating its grass, you don't disturb it.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, you have to come back to a more simple existence for a lot of us, and obviously feed the land and take care of the land. And Uranus always disrupts anything it comes into contact with. But also because now we've got Jupiter and Saturn, and particularly Saturn, in Aquarius squaring that Uranus, we're now going to experience the how can I describe it? What we've been perhaps ignoring over the last year and a half, the patch-up jobs are now the plaster is going to be taken off and go, as I said, to use the analogy of the leaking roof, that's going to be taken apart and we're going to see how bad it really is.
Right.
And so I think, Uranus and Taurus is going to be there for the next kind of, 5 years. Mm-hmm. So this is the start of it. Mm-hmm. But this is one of the most tense times because you've got the Jupiter and in particular the Saturn squaring, Uranus. And one of the interesting things about this is that the last time that Uranus and Saturn came into contact with each other was in 2011, right? And in the UK, what I remember in 2011 was, of course, the riots that occurred, and they came into prominence when Saturn was opposing Uranus. Saturn was in Libra and it was opposing Uranus. And so this is a square, which is what we say a tense aspect. So there's some relationship between the tensions of then and the tensions that are coming up. And when you get Saturn and Uranus in history that kind of clash in the sky, whether it's an opposition or whether it's a Uranus, you can bet that there will be a spark from youth, or what we would term as the rebellious, and the establishment. Those two will clash. And this is we're talking, you know, we're only talking a few days away that things are going to clash. And that's going to be a really interesting theme that's going to play out in 2021, even more than it has that we experienced it in 2020, particularly in America. But this is going to come prominence of the restrictions that are being placed, and how the public generally feel about it, and particularly young people. I mean, you know, older people can rebel, but the young people tend to have a vision, a stronger vision, let's say, of change. But yeah, so you're going to get that. So there's a kind of potent mixture that's coming up. And one of the ways to survive this is to look at agriculture, to look at the green industries, to look at how we can create jobs out of those, instead of, you know, basically the corporates actually really giving the farmers a hard time that they're not earning money.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the restrictions. So I think there's going to be real kind of changes that will be forced to come from that, and that will be not from the establishment. They'll be from the general public. There'll be movements towards that.
Right, cool. You know, I mean, it's desperately needed. You know, when it comes to kind of our food system, generally, I don't think people really know how bad it is. You know, and
no.
You know, like the impact of deforestation in the Amazon. You know, I mean, the scale of it is phenomenal. Like, it's terrifying, the scale of deforestation.
Yeah.
You know, Siberia burned in 2020. I mean, we're heading for catastrophic change, like climate change. Anyway, I've derailed you in terms of starting yammering about food because
but it's interesting because I mean, to me, being an astrologer, you know, that symbolism of Uranus in Taurus, it's not because over the last year and a half we've sort of caused it. This has been going for a long time, and now it's kind of like, here we are, and you're going to have to do something about it, you know. And I think that the particular Saturn and Jupiter both squaring Uranus, and that Mars as well. That's like, to me, that's a very tense, very heavy combination of the general mantra. Well, something's got to change here, you know. And it's not this kind of blind optimism. Don't worry, we'll all go back to normal in spring, as we're here in the UK. We're getting this kind of, it'll be fine by Easter, you know, we'll all go back to normal. No. And February is a kind of a key moment where you will begin to see come up to the surface some quite extraordinary new ideas, and new ways of looking at things, and new ways of responding to this current change. But listen, I feel like, you know, it's not going to be easy as well, because I feel like the unemployment situation is going to grow, and you know, people are going to have to be very quite cunning in how the next moves they make in terms of the career and their work. If you kind of go back to the normal, or what you deem as, it's gonna be quite tough. So it's a bit about sort of staying on your true path a little bit, and not going into the energy of fear too much, you know. I mean, any kind of, you know, magical practitioners out there, you know, stay away from rituals in January, astrological rituals, because you know, Mars in the Taurus is never a good combination, and you know, it's a heaviness out there. It's unless you really want unless you're a real chaos magician who loves to do that, you're going to get some really unpredictable results. So I feel like there is, underneath it all, there is some good stuff to come out of it, but yeah, it's kind of like at the moment it's going to be really sort of it's going to be very much in our faces as the future that could be, if we don't start to really kind of wake up and do something about it and react differently. But February kind of gives an early light. February for me is like there's a stellium of planets in Aquarius, so we really start to get the Aquarius themes really coming through during that time. I think that's a key. And we've got a lovely new moon on 11th of February in Aquarius, and I think that's going to be a key date. That day just before the 11th and just after. I think it's going to be absolutely a real key date in, actually, there's a little bit of optimism. There's a little bit of, things are actually may just change here. But as I said, the vaccine will be the main kind of contributor to that. And Jupiter in Aquarius is firmly in Aquarius. By then it's in the middle of Aquarius, around about 12-13 degrees, and Jupiter in Aquarius is kind of a nice combination, although Saturn kind of keeps it in check, because Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn and its modern ruler is Uranus. So yeah, this establishment and the norm and the unconventional really in battles here. But remember, Aquarius rules the collective, and I always think when there's a lot of Aquarian energy going along, and a lot of people have been talking about the age of Aquarius and stuff like that, but you've got to look at the opposite sign of Aquarius, which is Leo. And I'm going to look at the negative qualities as a collective Leo, which can be very, very self-centered, and so we can get two aspects of this. We can get the Aquarius, everybody's our equal, humanitarian energy, or we could get everyone out for themselves. It's the darker aspects of the Aquarius. I'm just going to be in my little space, in my little bubble, and not worry. It's all about me surviving. That's a very Leo. It's about me. So the polarity is going to play out, and that's why when you're dealing with collective predictions, particularly when it's less about individuals, it's a bit more tricky, because which way is the collective going to go? Is it going to go into that kind of very equality, that positive manifestation of Aquarius, or is it going to go into the more polarity of the Leo negative energy, which is going to be very self-centered and it's all about me, and I'm shutting up shop now, I'm all right, Jack, kind of scenario. I think this full moon, my senses will go into the Aquarian much more. I hope, but yeah, there's always the polarity playing out, and we got such a lot of planets. So for anybody who's got a lot of planets in Aquarius in the charts, massive year. Particularly if you're born between January 21st and the 30th of January, 1st of Feb, you're really getting hit with a lot of planetary activity. And particularly if you're a Taurus born, April 21st to the 30th of April, again, getting hit a lot here. And the Leos as well, 23rd of July to the 1st of August, and the Scorpios around about the 23rd of October to the 1st of November. Those signs are really getting hit, those fixed signs, because the last couple of years we've been in the cardinal signs, and cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, which are the start of the zodiac seasons. Hence, we've been Capricorn, which is the first in the northern hemisphere, is the first sign of winter. And cardinal signs are very forward-looking. Things move quite fast. Fixed signs are the middle part of the season. So Taurus is the middle part of spring. Leo is the middle part of summer. Scorpio is the middle part of autumn. and Aquarius is in the middle part of winter. And when you get fixed signs dominating, which we have now, this is fixed, things don't change quickly. Things remain the same. But because we got these planets like Uranus and Saturn and Jupiter in the fixed signs, that's a real kind of battle going on. Normally, if they weren't in there, you'd say, well, things are just going to remain the same political parties, same people who have been heading, the political parties, or, the policies are going to remain pretty much the same. Steady as she goes, the old saying. Because you've got these planets in this sign, it's rocking the boat. And so you've got this battle. That's what I mean. I feel like the politicians, in the Western world are going to really try and kind of maintain the grip, even though it's very loose by old sort of ways of doing stuff, which is just not going to sit well with the general public. They're going to kind of go, hang on here, but this has been done and it didn't work. So why are we doing it again? And that's when you get revolution, which sounds extreme. But, revolutions happen in different ways in the 21st century.
Yeah, very
maybe
true.
it's through the media, but this is kind of what's occurring, and it's a battle here. So February, we still got a bit going on. As we go into March, of course, March is a slightly different beast, mainly because the sun for the early part of March is in Pisces, and Pisces is the end of the zodiac, and therefore it for us astrologers it always feels like the end of a particular cycle, and our astrological new year is of course at the spring equinox. It's around about 20th of March, 21st of March. When I look at kind of March generally, we've got a few things going on here. So right on about the 4th of March, on the 4th of March, here's a real massive turning point. That second sort of week in March, turning point. Mars, that I talked about, that was in Taurus, then moves into Gemini. Totally different energy. It's finally come out of that heavy energy of being in Taurus, and it's not being affecting Saturn, Jupiter, and Uranus. It goes in Gemini. Gemini is a mutable sign, much more playful. It's ruled by Mercury. It's lighter. It's an air element sign. So Mars and Gemini, they're not natural partners, but they could do a lot more than Mars could do a lot more than it can in Taurus. And for me, if we talk about the vaccines and stuff like that and what's going on, that's the major turning point, that second week of March, when we actually can see, okay, there's something happening here. This might have the answer for a lot of people. This might be it. So that's going to be crucial here. That's a crucial day, I think, in 2021, March the 4th. It just, for me, that Mars, which has been, so much of a problem, not just in this year, 2021, but 2020. It's just, it's not been able to function so properly. So for me, that's a major turning point. And the other thing that I think is interesting is that around that time, we've got a conjunction between Jupiter and Mercury that are both around about 17, 18 degrees in Aquarius. And that's very looking forward into the big picture, really taking things on. And again, technology having a massive impact on the way that we look at things. So for me, March is again, I would say that from the 4th of March, it looks like we're actually doing something and things are actually happening. And that maybe we can come back to some kind of normality here. Whenever we've got, though, a lot of the Pisces energy, and the sun in Pisces, and also Venus is in Pisces during March, early March and the middle of March, is that Pisces rules a bit of smoke and mirrors, and a little bit sometimes that Piscean energy can be a bit deceptive. And Neptune, which is the the modern ruler of Pisces also rules advertising and general media. And so you can get a lot of smoke and mirrors around about that time. And, you know, as the sun reaches towards Neptune, which will be around about the 10th of March, that's going to be a little bit of a funny time period. You know, it may be that things in the press come out, maybe about the vaccines, that are a little bit kind of incorrect in how they're being reported, or something stoked up that kind of gets a bit of a frenzy. I don't think that will last for long, but certainly you know, for me, Neptune and the sun is the establishment as well as Saturn, the sort of in the patriarchal society, and Neptune is one of those that, you know, can confuse things as well. So yeah, I feel that's a little bit of a funny time, that 10th of March, 10th, 11th of March. But as I said earlier, Mars can start to do stuff. It can actually begin to do stuff that it hasn't been able to be freed up from for a long period of time. The other thing that I think is a real turning point is the travel at this time as well. You know, as I'm talking here, I'm looking at charts and moving them forwards here. So, but here's there is a turning point that's coming up to do with, and I'll give the timing now here. But it's around about near the spring equinox, that from March the 20th to around about the 1st of April. And the reason I say that is because what we call in astrology the moon's nodes, which are geometrical points based on the orbit of the moon. And for 2020, these 2 points, which are always in opposite of each other, the north node and the south node, we're in Cancer and Capricorn. So this is where you get the eclipses in these signs. And so they really magnified, accentuated the Pluto and the Saturn in Capricorn here. Now, they moved recently into the 2 signs of zodiac, which are Gemini and Sagittarius. And those 2 signs of zodiac are very to do with movement, short distance travel and long distance travel. And Mars, which is a planet that likes to conquer, is coming close to conjoining with the nodal points, particularly with the north node. So the north node is seen as the more positive manifestation rather than the south node. And Gemini is traditionally to do with short distance travel, and Sagittarius is traditionally to do with long distance travel. And so I feel like this like late March, also the sun on the 20th of March goes into Aries as well. So it's the new start of the astrological astrological cycle. And so I feel like travel restrictions are certainly being lifted, particularly short distance, I would say first, and then considering long distance will start to begin to manifest. So as we're speaking now in early January, and you know, majority of lockdown in the UK and in Europe, I kind of feel that, you know, that March period, that late March, is when things start to become, people are able to travel a lot more, because of that Mars conjoining with the North Node, and opposing the South Node is in Sagittarius. So this hot, but I you know, I feel it's going to be very sporadic and a little bit chaotic. So if you you know, you may be able to travel, but it's going to be a little chaotic to do, if that makes sense. Because it's a big thing at the moment, travel, movement, and the pandemic's changed it.
Yeah, it's massive, you know, and people are genuinely concerned. Will they see, you know, relatives in other countries? You know,
yeah.
It's a genuine concern.
Yeah. So I feel like in terms of travel industry and movement in general, this is going to be a major turning point, the last week of March. So you had the sort of the vaccine turning point on March the 4th onwards, and then you've got the travel. But first of all, short distance travel, and then the long distance. I will come to that as we go into the next month, which of course is going to be in the April month. So that'll be a real focus about how we travel. Obviously, people are starting to think as we go into spring equinox generally about travel and the summer holidays and stuff like that. So it's definitely in the consciousness of people and the collective consciousness. People starting to look at that a lot more. So it's going to be kind of interesting. And I'll talk about the long distance in a minute as it's coming up, because I'm just going to talk about April here. So for me, April's always a busy month generally for a lot of people, energetically, how they look at it. But for me, it's one of the quieter months actually in this year, surprisingly. What we've got going on is we've got, at that time, we've got Saturn and Uranus still in square aspect here with each other. There's sort of a continuation. So that tension between the two, the establishment and the public, is still going to be around an awful lot. Perhaps it's not just magnified because Jupiter is moving forward through Aquarius, and I'm going to come to that kind of in a minute, because one of the major months that I'm looking forward is going to be May, and I just want to go into May here, because a lot begins to actually change in May, and it's a tricky kind of month. They're all tricky in 2021, but May's particularly tricky. So one of the reasons as to why is there's a couple of things going on here. One, the Uranus and Taurus really get sparked off really significantly. We've also got, and this kind of occurs, that in May, early May, we've got Mars goes into Cancer. And I talked about Mars being comfortable in Gemini. It's in its fall in Cancer. So Mars is again starting to cause a few problems. It's domestic problems. Cancer is all about properties and home and stuff like that. So properties, mortgages, look out at that time in May. Got a few issues coming out to do with property, mortgages that will come out. Mars cannot function particularly well. Luckily, at first, it does not hit any other planets. So it is migrated slightly by the fact that it's not going to hit any other planets yet. It will do, but it does. You'll see that things get a little tricky in that area to do with property or anything to do with property. But here's the main thing that I feel is really kind of strong that's coming out, and it happens on May the 14th, and this is to do with long distance travel. So on May the 14th, Jupiter, which spends a year in each sign of zodiac, it goes into, it's been in Aquarius since mid-December of 2020. It goes into Pisces briefly. And Jupiter is actually really, it's in its rulership, in its traditional rulership in Pisces. And, the symbolism of that is the ability to travel, across sea. So Jupiter is finally got some movement. When it's in Aquarius, it's okay. It's better than it is in Capricorn, but it's still being told off by Saturn. So it can't quite go for what it wants. But as soon as it goes into Pisces, it's freed up. And I suspect if you're looking for, overseas travel, travel restrictions overseas from May the 14th, I think that's when that will occur. or those travel restrictions certainly coming in. And it remains in Pisces just for a short while, but enough to kind of make things kind of happen in the travel industry. So it might be a kind of a little bit of excuse me, blind optimism. So it goes into Pisces May the 14th. It goes retrograde on the 20th of June, which is a real turning point. But it remains in Pisces until the 29th of July. And then it goes back into Aquarius. Now, here's the thing. So I think long distance travel will kind of maneuver at that time. But when it goes retrograde on the 20th of June, I think it will be kind of very tentative. So travel industry is going to be, short distance travel is going to be all right. Then at that time, it just starts to feel like it's got to be quite tentative, or certain places are restricted. So what happens is on the 29th of July, Jupiter goes back into Aquarius, where it remains for most of the year, and goes direct, starts moving forward in October. So here's the thing. I think in terms of long distance travel, I think that long distance travel will happen, certainly May, but not properly happen until we get to the end of the year, going into 2022, when Jupiter really kind of resides in Pisces, which actually happens on the 30th of December 2021. So if we're looking at travel restrictions 2022, fantastic, no problem there. But in terms of, it's a bit stop and start. I just think that May the 14th, around that time, is going to be like, yeah, it can happen. Certain places start to open up. For me, like, May is a very big month in terms of things getting done. You know, things actually getting done, and us all being able to kind of really begin to feel, right, okay, these are the new rules that have to be implemented. Again, that Mars in Cancer is a little bit tricky of an energy to work with, and that does kind of remain for May, and indeed the early part of June. And then on the 12th of June, Mars goes into Leo, where it's more than comfortable. So that helps. So May's a bit of a turning point. And you've also got the Uranus factor, the Saturn factor. Saturn's going to be at 13 degrees in Aquarius in the middle of May. Uranus is going to be 11 degrees in Taurus. So you can see those two are only 2 degrees apart in orb. So there's still causing friction. And that really is the template for 2021 in terms of those two sparring off each other. You know, that's political chaos, that's social unrest, that's the establishment against, you know, the rebellious or the unconventional. You'll get new subcultures starting to begin to manifest out of that. It's really interesting, and I haven't really looked into this actually. Opportunity. This goes back to my youth actually. These the illegal raves coming back into culture, which of course was my late 80s, early 90s, is when I was kind of, you know,
yep, I remember
18, 90, yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting that kind of coming in, because if I remember the last time that back then, and I'm just gonna delve into my ephemeris back in time, and just look at that, because as I said, I probably looked in the past, but we had, certainly in 89 and 90, we had Uranus in Capricorn, and at that time, and then sort of 92, 91. In 1991, Saturn goes into Aquarius. So we have that Aquarian themes. And in 1990, we had Saturn in also Capricorn. And eventually that goes Aquarius. So it's kind of interesting that that's youth subculture of the illegal raves, and that sort of very being lucky enough to live through that times. It was a fantastic time of everyone being equal, and no matter what subculture you came from, you were just included in this kind of mass movement. And I think a very similarity probably in terms of fashion and baggy clothes coming back in, which is what happens, isn't it?
I'm just delighted my wardrobe might come back in. That's
wardrobe. Yeah, you'll be able to get your white gloves and your whistle out again. And so will I. So I'll see you in a field somewhere near, just off Oxford, or a petrol station, as we tended to end up. So it's kind of that's interesting. The new subcultures coming in, and you know, you see that with particular cycles of particularly the social planets Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus as well. Uranus definitely, to me, relates to cultural shifts and changes here. You know, and you know, we're coming into an air sign element, because a lot of the millenniums, people born you know, particularly I'd say the late 80s, who were born in the 80s, during that time, 80s, early 90s, who are now late 20s, early 30s, have been very, very hit by a lot of the energy, because they were born with that Uranus Neptune in Capricorn energy. So they're being hit. And you know, people born 1975, 1976, 77, 78, 79, they're being hit because they had Uranus in Scorpio when they were born, and Uranus is now in Taurus, the opposite sign. So they're being hit a lot. So you get particular segments of generations that are born, they get hit astrologically. And those two age groups that are being hit the most, you know. So that's kind of an interesting culture. So subcultures are becoming much more prevalent, you know. And back then we had the poll tax riots, and which I went along to, and you know, stuff like that, and and the banning of repetitive beats. I remember the bill that went through; you couldn't have repetitive beats. So the similarities that are coming here.
The illegal. There was also the kind of the illegal gatherings. There was a bill as well. Was it the same one?
Yeah, I think that it couldn't be more than like 5 people and a repetitive beat. You know, so those kind of things coming back in, and obviously the fashion as well. And of course, our age group back then were predominantly grew up with the Conservative government in the UK. You know, so again, that generation, again, as the people 16, 17, 18, that kind of group, 50s, have known pretty much the Conservative government. So you get these similar cycles that come in. So that's an interesting May's a turning point. I'm just going to move to June. I've just got a bit of a coughing fit at the moment, so any questions you want to ask me at the moment would be great. So when it gets interesting, because June, we've done like the first 6 months of the year, and to me that's one of the most traumatic.
Okay.
When we start to get into June, we start to see things become a little bit more in place in terms of a settling down. I would say the energy is not so frenetic or feels like, oh God, what's happening here? I would say the industry that I would say is mainly up in the air is the travel industry, like I said earlier. You know, that really to me is a little bit sort of, oh yes, it's great, you could travel, or you can't, there's going to be certain restrictions and stuff like that. However, on around about June the 3rd and the 4th, Mars opposes Pluto in the sky. So Mars is at 26 degrees in Cancer, and Pluto is at 26 degrees in Capricorn. And that's going to be quite difficult. My interpretation of that is to do with the virus itself, because Pluto rules collective viruses, and Mars is like Pluto's like the higher octave in modern astrology of Mars. And so, a lot of astrologers talked about, what rules COVID. I mean, you could say Mercury because it rules the lungs. You could say Pluto's collective virus. You could even say Mars generally rules temperatures or viruses in medical astrology generally. So that opposition, that's a tricky one, because my interpretation of that is it's almost like governmental bodies going, we've defeated this and it's going to be fine. But that's not the case. So what's out there in terms of the media is going to be like, yeah, we've defeated this, we've got for it, but actually it's not the case. And it may be that particularly I feel like in the UK that's a big problem. And the reason I say the UK is simply because the UK has a very strong Capricorn Cancer axis in its natal chart. We say the 1801 UK chart, the United Kingdom come together. So there might be a little spike that happens during that period, or it may be that the travel is kind of lifted and it goes a bit crazy, and then we go, oh, actually we might have to put this back. So just look out for those dates. That's June, I guess, like June the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Okay, 2021 mapped out for you there, chaps. Thank you again, Demian. I've just booked my reading with him so to see what 2021 holds for me. So do check out his website if you fancy doing the same. The links for which are in the show notes. Okay, that's it from me. Wish you and everybody else as good to 2021 as we can get. Hunker down, chaps.